Alrighty guys, let's go ahead and do stations 4, 5, and 6 so that you have the correct answers to study for your test. So number 1 says, why is it important to know how to accurately read and interpret graphs? Well, there's a couple reasons. Number 1, it just means you can't be manipulated, right? So if you know how to accurately read a graph, we saw when we did our graphing activity in class that pie chart and that bar chart that we saw, they can be misleading, all right? So you can, or we'll say you will not easily be manipulated, but also you will be able to accurately show your data from experiments. When you are a scientist and you are collecting data, or you are trying to convey something to a person, you want to make sure that you have your graphs accurately titled and labeled so that they can see exactly what you found in your data. It's very important that it's accurate just to have a universal standard for scientists across the board. So question 2 said to create a bar graph of the data below. Remember your graph title, axis title, and equal tick marks. Now, I think you guys did this in Google Docs, so you didn't have actual printouts of your answer sheet, and that's okay. So if you didn't know how to do this, not a big deal. Just make sure you know what a bar graph is supposed to look like, and make sure you can read a bar graph. There are a couple of bar graph questions on your test that's coming up on Monday. So for this, to do this, and I'll show you really quickly, I already have one up, but if you were going to do this, you could open up a Google Sheet and you just can copy the information. So we have our sport on the left, and then we have our number of students on the right, and then you come into your Google Sheet and you can paste it, and then if you go to insert chart, it will insert a chart of the information for you, and then you can manipulate your axis titles. But this is what it should look like. So remember, your x-axis is on the bottom. So your x-axis on the bottom, think of like X marks the spot for a pirate. A pirate's always sailing to the horizon. The horizon is flat in the distance. And then your y-axis is up and down, so think Y to the sky. And then we have our title up top. Okay, so our number of students is on the Y, our sport is on the X, and then our students and their favorite sports, our title is up top. Okay, so with the bar chart, remember the bars typically do not touch, okay, and you should be able to understand the information from it. So if I didn't give you the table to begin with and I just gave you this chart to look at, you should be able to see basketball and then count up to the top. So we've got these tick marks are in equals of 8 or 2, so 2, 4, 6, 8. So we know that between 4 and 6, this should be 5, okay, because they're equal markings. So we know that 5 students said that basketball was their favorite sport, okay? Likewise with baseball, if we go and follow the top of the bar over, we know that 3 people said that baseball was their favorite. 8 people said that football was their favorite. 4 people said that soccer was their favorite. And then 2 people said that swimming was their favorite. So for a bar chart, you won't have to make one on your test because your test will be electronic, but you do need to be able to read them, okay? I think some of us struggled with making our bar charts when we were doing them, but just make sure at the very least you can read them, okay? So that is the bar chart for station 4, okay? And remember, the independent variable is always graphed on the x-axis, so the bottom. So in this case, our independent variable was our type of sport, and then the dependent variable is always graphed on the y, okay? So independent always on the x, and dependent always on the y. All right, so station 5 is density. So question 1 says, how would you describe the property of density, the definition? So remember, density is how much stuff is in a given space. So remember the jelly bean jars that I showed you guys? The jar that has more jelly beans in it would be more dense, and the jar that had less jelly beans in it would be less dense. So the more stuff that's packed into a space, typically we're talking about molecules, the more dense it will be. And typically the denser something is, the heavier it is. So when you're looking at something like the image below, so in question 2, it says to list the objects A, B, and C in order from most to least dense. So the most dense is going to have more molecules packed into a specific amount of space, so it will be heavier and it will sink in liquid. So when we're looking at these images right here, we know that the one that sank to the bottom will be the most dense, and that floats on top will be the least dense. So here in question 2, C would be the most, B would be the middle because it's floating in the middle, and then A would be the least dense. Okay, and you know because it's floating on the water. So the least dense will float on the water and the most dense will sink. So then 3 says, using your knowledge of density, explain why the dish soap would sink to the bottom of the cylinder. So this is in relation to the lab that we did. So remember we did dish soap, water, and rubbing alcohol. And when you guys put them in your cylinders, I know we had some issue because the dish soap had been sitting out for a while. But the dish soap sank to the bottom because it was more dense. So we could say the molecules in the dish soap were more tightly packed, and so the soap was more dense than the water and the alcohol, causing it to sink to the bottom. Okay? And there is a question on your test with a graduated cylinder that has different liquids, and you just have to be able to identify which one is the most and the least dense. So just remember, most dense on the bottom, least dense on the top, and density is how much stuff is packed into a space. Remember, we don't have to calculate density. You'll do that when you get into biology and chemistry. But for now, you do need to know what density is, because density is very important when we talk about the lithosphere and also when we talk about weather, which will be coming up in a little bit. All right, and last but not least, Station 6, the branches of earth science. This is the only lesson that you guys did on your own, okay? So what I mean by that is that I had that pre-recorded video of me going over your notes. You should have done your notes and your assignment by yourself, and this will be on your test, okay? So if for some reason you did not do your lesson, your Unit 0, Lesson 9 on the branches of earth science, you want to do that before Monday because this is going to be on your test, okay? You have to know the branches of earth science, and you have to know what each one deals with, okay? So it says, match the items to the correct spheres. So mountains, volcanoes, and rocks. This would be your lithosphere, also known as your geosphere. Okay. So the lithosphere and the geosphere are the same thing. I saw it in 2 different ways in your notes and also in your activity. The lithosphere and the geosphere are the same thing. And you also need to know that the branch of earth science that studies the lithosphere or the geosphere is called geology. Okay, so geology is used to study the geosphere. 2 is lakes, rivers, and oceans. This is the hydrosphere. Okay, so that's D. The hydrosphere are the rivers, the lakes, and the oceans. Oxygen and air, that's the atmosphere. So that's the branch of the earth science. And then plants and animals, that's the biosphere. Bio means life. So the biosphere has to do with everything that's plants and animals on the planet. We are going to learn about each of these branches. So your unit 1, we're about to get ready to learn about the lithosphere / the geosphere. Okay. So geosphere, hydrosphere, atmosphere, and then biosphere. And then this is an example of the activity you guys did. I gave you that concept map that you could fill in where you had to choose a catastrophic Earth event and then just talk about how it impacted each of the spheres. So it says around noon on August 24th, a huge eruption from Mount Vesuvius showered volcanic debris over the city of Pompeii, followed the next day by clouds of blisteringly hot gases. Buildings were destroyed, the population was crushed or asphyxiated, and the city was buried beneath a blanket of ash and pumice. So explain how this catastrophic event potentially impacted each sphere of the planet. So the atmosphere is the air, and we know based on this information that there was a lot of debris that was showered in the atmosphere, and then clouds of blistering hot gases. So we would say the air was filled with debris and hot gases. Okay? And that's it. That's all you have to do. You just have to quickly say how each of the parts of the planet were impacted. The biosphere, so remember biosphere is life. So humans and animals died from the eruption. Okay? So that's how it was impacted. The biosphere was impacted because humans and animals died. Okay, and the biosphere is dealing with life. Okay. The hydrosphere is water. So it doesn't say particularly in here what happened to the lakes and rivers that were close by, but we could probably assume that they got contaminated with ash. Okay, so waterways were likely contaminated with ash and debris. And then the lithosphere, also known as the geosphere, okay, lithosphere / geosphere, it's a volcanic eruption, okay? Volcanoes are a part of the lithosphere because they're a part of the crust of the earth. So we could say volcano erupted, changing the landscape. And that's that, okay? So anytime you have a catastrophic event like a hurricane or a volcanic eruption or, wildfires, every single bit of the planet is impacted. Every sphere of earth science is impacted. So we just have to be able to identify what each branch is, what it encompasses, and that's what we did up here. And then we have to be able to identify how these events can impact each of the spheres. Okay, so I know this was the only lesson that I didn't do with you, but you guys are very capable of, making sure your notes are filled in and doing that assignment that I gave you. Okay, it's not that bad, but there are quite a few questions on the branches of earth science, just being able to identify them, knowing which one's which. So at the very least, please make sure your notes are done when you come in on Monday, because I'm going to let you guys use your notes on your test. Okay? All right, so that is your Unit 0 station review. If you guys have any questions or need any more clarification on anything, let me know, and good luck with studying.